Rain lashed against the mansion's tall windows. Wind howled like a tormented beast. Inside, 30-year-old Max sat alone, the only sound the crackling fire in the hearth. The old house groaned around him, a symphony of creaks and whispers. He was used to it. Used to the isolation, used to the feeling that he was being watched from the shadows of the cavernous rooms. Tonight, however, felt different. The storm seemed angrier. The silence between the thunderclaps heavier. A prickle ran down Mac's spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. The night was alive with the fury of a lightning storm, thunder rattling the windows of the old mansion. Mac had been sitting alone in the dimly lit study. The only sound, the steady ticking of the grandfather clock. Suddenly, a sharp crash from the front of the house shattered the uneasy silence, making Mac jump to his feet, heart pounding in his chest. He froze in place, every muscle tense, listening intently for any sign of movement. The house seemed to hold its breath with him. For a long moment there was nothing, just the distant rumble of thunder and the soft patter of rain against the windows. Silence pressed in, thick and heavy, amplifying his unease. Gathering his courage, Mac crept towards the source of the sound. Each step he took on the creaky wooden floor echoed through the vast emptiness of the mansion, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. Shadows danced along the walls, thrown by the flickering candle he carried, and every corner seemed to hide a secret. As he reached the grand staircase, a shaft of moonlight filtered through the stained glass window, casting eerie patterns on the steps. There, at the very top, something caught his eye, a glint of metal, small but unmistakable, reflecting the pale light in the darkness. He climbed the stairs slowly, his breath shallow, until he stood before the object. It was a bell, unlike any he had ever seen. Not the kind you'd find in a church tower or hanging in a schoolhouse, but something far older and far stranger. The bell was ancient, its surface dark and tarnished with age. It looked as though it had been buried for centuries, the metal corroded and pitted, yet somehow still whole. Dust clung to its curves and the air around it felt colder, as if the object itself radiated a chill. Mac leaned in for a closer look. The bell was engraved with strange symbols, markings that twisted and writhed across the metal, almost as if they were alive. The symbols seemed to shift in the moonlight, their meaning just out of reach, filling Mac with a sense of unease and curiosity in equal measure. He glanced back down the staircase, his mind racing. Where had this bell come from? The front door was slightly ajar, swaying gently in the storm's wind. Mac was certain he hadn't left it unlocked. Had someone entered the house and left this strange object as a message, or a warning? The question swirled in his mind, unanswered, as the storm raged on outside, and the bell sat silently on the steps, waiting. Hesitantly, Mac reached out and picked up the bell. The room was shrouded in a heavy, almost suffocating darkness, broken only by the faintest slivers of moonlight filtering through the dusty windows. Every step he took seemed to echo in the silence, amplifying his uncertainty. The bell sat on a small, ornate table, its surface tarnished with age, as if it had been waiting for someone, anyone, to disturb its long slumber. Mac's hand hovered above it for a moment, trembling ever so slightly before he finally mustered the courage to grasp it. It was surprisingly heavy, cold to the touch. The chill from the metal seemed to seep into his skin, sending a shiver up his arm. As he held it, he noticed a thin layer of condensation, almost like frost, clinging to its surface. The bell felt alive, as if it were pulsing with a hidden energy. The metal seemed to hum faintly in his hand, a low vibration that resonated with something deep inside him, something he couldn't quite name. It was as if the bell was aware of his presence, responding to his touch in a way that was both fascinating and deeply unsettling. An inexplicable urge to ring it washed over him. He knew he shouldn't. Every instinct screamed at him to put it down, to leave it alone, but the compulsion was overwhelming. It was as if the bell was whispering to him, promising answers to questions he hadn't even thought to ask. Mac's grip tightened, his knuckles whitening as he fought the urge, his mind racing with possibilities and fears. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier, pressing in on him, making it harder to breathe. He could almost hear a faint voice just at the edge of perception urging him onward. There was something inherently unsettling about the bell, a feeling of wrongness that emanated from its core. It was more than just an old object. It felt like a relic from another world, a world where the rules were different, where darkness reigned. The shadows around it seemed to twist and writhe, as if alive, and the air grew colder the longer he held it. Mac felt as though he was standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable, a precipice between reality and nightmare. The bell was a threshold, and he was about to cross it. But curiosity, as it often does, got the better of him. He lifted the bell and gave it a gentle shake. The movement felt almost ritualistic, as if he were reenacting a moment that had happened countless times before. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears. The candlelight flickered, casting strange dancing shadows on the walls. For a brief moment, Mac wondered if he was making a terrible mistake, but the need to know, to understand, was too strong to resist. The sound that emerged was not the clear, ringing tone he expected. It was a deep, resonant clang, like the tolling of a funeral bell. The note seemed to hang in the air, vibrating through the floorboards and walls, reverberating in his bones. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light, swirling as if disturbed by the sound alone. The bell's voice was ancient, mournful, and impossibly loud for such a small object. It was a sound that spoke of endings, of things lost and forgotten, and it filled the room with a sense of dread that was almost palpable. It seemed to vibrate through him, through the house itself. Then silence. Nothing happened. The oppressive quiet returned, heavier than before, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Mac stood frozen, the bell still in his hand, waiting for something, anything, to break the stillness. But the only sound was the pounding of his own heart, echoing in the vast emptiness. He realized with a growing sense of unease that the true consequences of his action might not be immediate, but they had already begun. Mac rang the bell again. The sound echoed through the empty halls, a sharp metallic note that seemed to vibrate in the very bones of the old mansion. Each toll felt heavier than the last, as if the bell itself was reluctant to be disturbed, its voice carrying secrets from a time long past. Mac's hand trembled slightly as he lowered the bell, the cold metal biting into his palm. This time, a cold breeze swept through the house, extinguishing a few of the candles he'd lit earlier. The sudden gust was unnatural, as if the house itself had exhaled in response to the bell's call. The flames flickered desperately before surrendering, plunging the hallway into deeper darkness. Mac's breath caught in his throat as the temperature dropped, the air thick with the scent of old wax and something older, something he couldn't quite name. The shadows in the corners seemed to deepen, to writhe as if alive. He shivered. The darkness pressed in, shifting and stretching along the walls, forming shapes that danced just beyond the reach of the remaining candlelight. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside seemed amplified, as if the house itself was listening, waiting. Mac's imagination ran wild, conjuring images of unseen eyes watching from the gloom, of ancient spirits roused from slumber. He should have just left the bell on the steps and ignored it, but he couldn't. Something about the bell called to him, a compulsion he couldn't explain. It was as if the object had a will of its own, urging him to ring it, to awaken whatever lay dormant within the house's walls. He hesitated at the threshold, torn between the urge to flee and the strange pull that kept him rooted in place. He had to ring it again. The urge was overwhelming, a force that seemed to rise from the very floorboards and seep into his bones. His hand shook as he raised the bell once more, the weight of it suddenly immense, as if the air around him had thickened. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing himself for whatever might come next, and let the bell's voice ring out into the night. The third ring brought a new element, a flicker of movement at the edge of his property. Through the warped glass of the front door, Mac glimpsed something shifting in the fog, a shape that hadn't been there before. The overgrown grass swayed as if brushed by invisible feet, and the mist seemed to thicken, swirling around the indistinct form. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing the bell's toll. He couldn't make out what it was, just a shift in the darkness beyond the reach of the dying light. The porch lamp flickered, casting a weak, trembling glow that barely pierced the gloom. Whatever was out there moved with a slow, deliberate grace, never fully revealing itself, always just out of sight. Max strained his eyes, trying to separate shadow from substance, but the night seemed determined to keep its secrets. A figure? He wasn't sure. It could have been a trick of the light, a product of his frayed nerves in the oppressive atmosphere. Yet deep down, he knew it was real. The shape lingered at the edge of the trees, half hidden, watching. It didn't move closer, but its presence was undeniable, a silent witness to the ritual unfolding within the house. But he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that it was connected to the bell. The realization settled over him like a shroud. Whatever he had awakened was no longer content to remain in the shadows. With each toll, it drew nearer, answering the call he had unwittingly sent out into the night. Mac's fear was no longer just for himself, but for whatever boundary he might have crossed, and whatever might now be crossing back. Each ring brought the figure closer. The fourth ring, and it was at the gate. The fifth, and it was in the yard, moving with an unnatural stillness that made Mac's blood run cold. He tried to stop ringing the bell, but he couldn't. It was as if some unseen force had taken hold of him, compelling him to continue this terrifying game. His heart hammered in his chest. His breath came in short, sharp gasps. He felt a strange detachment from reality, as if he were watching himself in a nightmare, powerless to escape. He knew instinctively what the bell was doing. He was drawing something to him, something ancient and evil. He'd read enough folklore to know that bells were often used to ward off evil spirits, but this bell felt different. It felt like it was calling something home. The urge to ring the bell was overwhelming now, a physical need that clawed at his insides. He tried to fight it, but it was no use. He was a puppet, and the bell was the puppet master. Panic welled up inside him. He had to get rid of the bell. He hurled it across the room, the metal clanging against the wall with a sickening thud. But when he turned back, there it was, resting on the top step, as if it had never moved. He tried to throw it out the window, to smash it with a poker from the fireplace. Nothing worked. The bell always came back. He was trapped. He was going to die here, alone in this decaying mansion, with only the sound of the storm and the ringing of the bell for company. He couldn't take it anymore. The suspense was unbearable. He had to see what was coming for him. He picked up the bell one last time. This time there was no clang, no resonant tone, just a whisper of sound, barely audible. But it was enough. He felt a presence behind him, cold and menacing. He didn't need to turn around to know that the figure was there, inches away. He could feel its breath on the back of his neck, smell the stench of decay and something else, something ancient and evil. Mac closed his eyes, a single tear rolling down his cheek. It was over. He had rung the bell one too many times. The last thing he heard was the soft whisper of the bell, waiting patiently on the step, ready to lure its next victim into a terrifying game of cat and mouse. Who would it be? Would they be foolish enough to ring the bell? The storm raged on.